Hi, my name is Kathleen. I'm a registered psychologist and I like to make videos helping psychology students. I also make videos about study, health and psychology, so if any of that interests you, please be sure to check out my YouTube channel. Back in November 2023, I undertook the National Psychology exam. I did all my own study and preparation on my own. I didn't really get any external help and thankfully I passed on the first go. While I was going through this process of study, I felt like there was a little bit of a gap between all the resources and all the information that I had available to me and not really sure how to tackle it or how to go about it or how to structure my study. I felt like that was the hardest part. I didn't know what to study, when, how much study to devote to a particular topic. So I've put together this National Psychology exam mini-series that will help you understand the curriculum and get a sense of how you could develop a study plan to go about it. It's important for me to highlight that in no way this video series ruins the integrity of the National Psychology exam. We are simply unpacking the NPE curriculum so that you can get a better sense of how you might go about studying. I'm going to talk you through the strategies that I found really useful when I was trying to learn all of this information. The key things that I'm hoping you'll take away from this mini series is a clearer understanding of the curriculum, strategies for how to go about learning the information, and a better sense of how the NPE questions might be designed to help you with your study approach. If you do find this video series helpful, quick and easy ways to support my work is by giving it a like, leaving a comment down below, and also watching the video to the very end. That would just, help get it out there. Other things that you could consider doing too is there's a little heart at the bottom of this video. If you click on the three dots, there's a little heart that says thanks. You could click on that and donate a couple of dollars to the video. A lot of time, effort, and money does go into this series. I do it all on my own free time because I'm a geek and I really enjoy it. To make it more sustainable, if you could show your support in one of these ways, it would just mean the world to me. So please consider doing one of those things. One final quick plug, my videos are a great starting point for the NPE. However, if you want that added layer of structure to your NPE study process, I have developed my own NPE study plan. It's basically 2 months breaking down the study into small manageable bites, giving you suggestions of what topics you could study when, along with some reflection questions. So if you would find this resource helpful, that's down below too. Be sure to check that out. This video today is like our starting point, our introduction into the National Psych exam. So we'll be starting off by talking about some resources that I think are really useful to invest in. Next, we'll be talking about how long I recommend studying for. We'll then be talking about strategies for studying effectively. And finally, we'll be talking about how to develop your own study system for the National Psych exam. With all of that said, let's dive into this video. All right, so first up, we're going to be talking about resources for the National Psychology exam. APRA does have a list of recommended resources which you can access, and I'm going to leave a list to that down below. But I'm just going to highlight some of the key resources I found really helpful that I'm glad I invested in purchasing. First up, and probably the most obvious, the National Psychology exam textbook by Pelling and Burton. I want to be really honest and say that I did have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this textbook. I found that some of it was slightly dated, which does make sense. It was released, I think, a decade ago. As well as this, it didn't cover all of the information that I needed to study, but again, it's hard for one single resource to do that. What I really loved about it though was that it was such a great starting point to interpret the curriculum and work out what I needed to study or what I needed to go deeper in. It did break that down really well. In the end, I did read this whole book over the course of my study for the National Psych exam, and I am really glad I did that because it gave me a deeper understanding, I think, of the NPE, and also it just made me feel a little bit more competent in my day-to-day job working as a provisional psychologist. So I think as like a starting point resource, it was really handy. And the next resource, I just cannot recommend this one enough. It's called Ethical Practice in Applied Psychology by Boyle and Gamble, and I have nothing but nice things to say about this textbook. It was the thing that helped me feel so much more confident in my exam preparation for the ethics and communication section. What I really liked about it was it gave you a very practical insight into understanding a range of different concepts. I felt like it helped to consolidate my knowledge. It helped me think about situations critically and how I'd respond to them as a psychologist. I really, really liked this book. I think it should be at the top of your list of resources to purchase. Another resource that's kind of obvious is the APS Code of Ethics. Definitely make sure you have a copy of this. Finally, one more resource that I found helpful. It's not strictly necessary study, and it's also not on APRA's reading list. But personally, I found this quite helpful. It's called The DSM-5 Made Easy by James Morrison. What I really liked about this book is that it helps you have a really practical understanding of what different disorders look like. It helped me not just with the NPE, but also with my job. I really enjoyed this book, and it's a nice pairing with the DSM-5-TR, the latest version of the DSM at the moment. I think it's good to have both of these texts if you can, just in general for your job, but also for the NPE. I'm gonna leave a few more resources down below in the description of this video that I did find helpful, so be sure to check them out, along with APRA's reading list, so you can look at this as well. To be very honest though, the resources that I've mentioned are the main ones that I used for my study preparation, and I found this to be sufficient. Of course, it varies for everyone, and definitely check out APRA's reading list because they've got lots of other ideas for things you can look into as well. Next up, we're talking about how long should you study for the National Psychology exam? This is a common question that I get asked, and it was one that I grappled with myself when I was preparing for this exam. My initial approach was to do small bursts of study at the beginning of my internship. I did this for the first year. I was doing the 4+2, and I didn't really find this an effective study approach because I wasn't retaining any of the information I was reading up on. In the end, I spent about 10 weeks studying for the exam. I spent maybe 3 nights a week studying and 1 day on the weekend, and 4 weeks leading up to the exam, I took 3 mornings a week off of work just to get a little bit of extra time in for going over stuff. Everyone is different. I had some colleagues who found it helpful to spend about 4 or 5 months studying, and I had one colleague who found that he could study in about 6 weeks and he felt good to go. I think if I had done any more than 2 months of study and prep, I would have just been a bit burnt out. I think you have to be careful not to overdo it, because by the time I got to the exam, I was kind of bursting with information. I was just ready to get into the exam and let it all out. So I think there is a bit of a sweet spot to it. One final thing I'm going to recommend is doing what I'm going to call these deep dives into either interventions or assessment tools. I found this so helpful, not just in preparing for the NPE, but also in trying to be the best psychologist I could be. I felt like this was the thing that gave me an added layer of confidence in my job. Here or there in my internship, I would spend a week or a couple of weeks delving into a different intervention like CBT or ACT, spending time really learning about how this worked, different techniques. I did some courses. The other thing too that I did was I'd spend a few weekends here or there going through different assessment tools like the WISC and the WAIS and the WIMS. I would go through the book, work out how to do the test on a family or friend, work out how to interpret the results. I wish someone had told me this would be helpful early on. I would have started it sooner, because there is so much information to cover with the intervention and assessment sections. So if you can give yourself a bit of breathing time to do that throughout your internship, I think that's the thing that can make the difference. All right, now let's talk about how to effectively study for the exam. I think a lot of provisional psychologists get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of what the NPE curriculum asks you to study, because it is overwhelming. So just quickly, something that's important to remember: the ethics, assessment, and intervention sections, they're worth 30%, and the communication section is worth 10%. I want to begin by pointing out something that I observed that I kind of wish someone had told me when I started off my study. The assessment and the intervention sections, the way that I studied for them, I found to be very similar. It required me to be very familiar with intervention styles, also a range of assessment tools, and for this, I needed to memorize some of the information. I needed to know it really well so that I could have a sense of what a particular intervention looked like, or a sense of how to score or interpret a particular assessment tool. On the flip side, the way that I studied for the ethics and communication sections were very similar, where I found it really helpful to go through various dilemmas and work out how I would respond as a psychologist. So it was less about memorizing with these sections and more about feeling like I had a really good practical sense of what I would do as a psychologist in a range of different scenarios. In hindsight, that is probably one of the top things that I wish someone had told me when I was going into my NPE study prep. And following this video, the next 4 videos that I have lined up all delve into each section of the exam, so ethics, assessment, intervention, and communication, to give you a deeper understanding and help you work out your own study plan. Another key thing I learned about the exam as well is that it's not necessarily testing you on the textbook right thing to do. It's not black and white. Often it's gray. So what is the best thing that you can do in this hypothetical situation as a psychologist? What is the best course of action or the next best step to take? My final study tip is to do practice exam questions early on. In fact, I recommend doing them before you even start your studying. And it might feel a bit daunting and you might not get a very high score, and that's okay. The point of it is that it's going to give you a better sense of what information to look out for when you're studying. It's also going to give you a better sense of how the exam might be structured, what it might be like. The other thing that I found helpful with this too was to sit down and do some of the practice exam questions like I was sitting an exam. Again, this also really helped. The last thing we're going to talk about in this video is creating a study system. And by study system, I guess what I mean is like a place where you can store the information you're learning and go back and test yourself on it as you're preparing for the exam. The thing that I found really helpful was my study planner, which I created on the app Notion. What I really like about the app Notion is that it's just really straightforward to use. Even though it looks a little bit intimidating, as soon as you figure it out, it's super straightforward. It was easy for me to put all of the headings from the NP curriculum into my study planner. And my favorite function in Notion was using the little toggle function. So as I was learning something, I could add a little toggle under the heading, put some information in there that I was learning, and then hide it if I needed to test myself on it, and then go back and read over it while I was trying to consolidate that knowledge. The other thing too that I love about Notion is that it's an app. So I had Notion on my phone. I'll just get that up now. I had my Notion study planner on my phone, so I could read this when I was on the train or on my lunch break at work. And then when I got home, I could open up the app on my computer. I'm going to make a really short video on how to create your NP study plan using the app Notion, so stay tuned for this. But if you don't want to use the app Notion, other things I'd recommend considering is like Excel, Word doc, PowerPoint. You just want a space where you can put in the information that you're learning, like your summarized notes, just a space where you can store all of your study prep. Finally, the other thing that I found really helpful for the intervention and assessment sections of the exam was developing flashcards. I made hard copy flashcards because I'm pretty old school, but there are definitely apps out there that you can use for flashcard study systems. The nice thing about using flashcards is it's a quick, easy way to just start getting into retesting yourself on a particular topic, refreshing your memory and seeing if you've managed to store it in your long-term memory. We are reaching the end of this video, so as we wrap this up, a couple of things to keep in mind. What worked for me with my study approach might not work for you. I guess with this whole series, I want it to be like a nice starting point. It's like a springboard to get the ideas flowing for how you can think about the exam and how you can start to think about your study approach. So it should just be used as that, as your starting point. Take from it what's helpful, disregard what's not. Finally, as we wrap this up, remember that I have developed an NP study planner guide. It basically breaks down the study for the exam in a structured way. It gives you ideas for what this could look like, along with reflection questions. So if you'd find this resource helpful, there's a link to it in the description down below. I'm also active on Instagram and TikTok, where I share daily routines of what it's like working as a psychologist, along with things like podcasts I'm listening to, books that I'd recommend. So if you'd find that interesting, come and say hi to me on those platforms as well. I've got another national psych exam video coming up very soon, so stay tuned for this. But I'll leave it here for now. I hope that you have an excellent day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!